Hello and welcome to the Farmhouse Heaven, where we take DIY projects to the next level. My name is Marcos, and today we're going to build this modern farmhouse office desk with tons of storage and cable management features to help you keep a clean, clutter-free work environment. I'm going to leave a link in the description below where you can find the build plans for this project on our Etsy store. Enough talking, let's get to building. And just like any other woodworking project, everything starts by cutting down some sheet goods. I used a combination of a track, table, and miter saw to accomplish these cuts. I took pieces of pine over to the miter table to make the cuts for the cabinet toe boards and the countertop trim. I added a 1/2 inch to each of these dimensions on the build plan in order to come back and trim them accordingly once I got ready to put everything together. I made sure to cut the 45-degree angles first, followed by the straight cuts after. All right, now that we've got all the cutting out of the way, it's time for the assembly. And for the assembly piece, all we're gonna utilize is pocket holes. We're gonna try to make this as easy as possible, yet strong and sturdy. When drilling your pocket holes, make sure to place them on the bottom or the inside of your panels so they aren't visible on the finished project. Since this is going to be a frameless cabinet design, I'm going to utilize edge banding to cover the front portion of the side cabinets. When applying edge banding, I rough cut my strips larger than I needed in order to trim the excess when the glue dried. I simply ran an iron across the edge while applying firm pressure. Then I took a block to flatten and apply further pressure on the banding strips. In order to cut the grooves for the face frames, I measured 3.5 inches from the edge of the panel while raising my saw blade to 1/8 of an inch. I turned the panel over, completed the pass on the opposite side, and repeated the process for all face frames. When assembling the cabinets, I like to use spacers to ensure proper alignment of all panels. I cut a 4-inch spacer to place at the bottom of the cabinet, then added some wood glue and drilled the mighty pocket holes. Make sure the pocket holes on the bottom panel are facing down and the ones on the front braces are facing inside the cabinet. Once I had this side of the panel completed, I placed the spacer on the opposite panel, added wood glue, and used gravity to apply pressure as I drilled more mighty pocket holes. Next, I added these triangle corner braces to the inside of the cabinets for added support. I simply used wood glue and 1 1/4 inch brad nails to secure them in place. Make sure to shoot these in an angle to prevent blowing out on the other side. Oh yeah, I forgot to add pocket holes to the top of the cabinets in order to screw down the countertop. So guess what I'm doing now? Next, I decided to add a profile to the cabinet toe boards. I made 2 passes on the router table, removing a little bit of material at a time to avoid tear outs. And just so you don't make the same mistakes that my assistant made earlier, because of course, I didn't make the mistake. But make sure that you mark the sides where you're gonna be putting the profile on, because otherwise you're gonna end up with all similar pieces like this. And you wanna make sure that you end up with pieces that look like these. So anyways, don't make the same mistakes my assistant made. And now adding tons of wood glue to these toe boards and some 1.25 inch brad nails to secure them in place. Just remember that the front trim piece does not have an entire board down here at the bottom, so when you place your glue, it needs to be around the perimeter. and make sure that you capture the actual wood so you're not shooting nails in an empty hole. And in case you're not already doing so, go ahead and follow us on Facebook and Instagram to see a ton of other projects we haven't stored. Onto drawer construction. For these drawers, I'm going to utilize some wood glue and 1/4 inch wide by 1 inch long crown staples. I like to use crown staples more than brad nails just because I feel these have a little bit more grasping power than a brad nail would have. Just make sure that the front and rear panel of the drawer are sitting inside of the side panels. That way, when you drive your crown staples or your brad nails on the side and you pull the drawer doesn't come apart if you do it the opposite direction. Exactly as I did right there. Just make sure to take your time checking for square while putting these drawers together. It really pays dividends in the end. I like to sand the drawer sides and the bottom panel before attaching them together, as it makes it much easier to hit all the edges with the orbital sander. Now, to attach the drawer bottoms, I'm also going to utilize crown staples, but I'll go with 1/2 inch deep instead. Again, check for square and use a clamp across the corners if needed to make a proper alignment. Now that that is out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and swing it over to the router table where I have a flush trim router bit so that I can clean up the edges. I used some wood putty to fill in the holes and sanded the outside panels as well. I sanded these to 220 grit for a smooth finish. The countertop is comprised of 3/4 inch birch panel and some slats that I use as spacers to elevate the overall height to 1.5 inches. I usually have some scrap pieces laying around and use those for this purpose. Make sure to measure 14 5/8 of an inch from the outside to place the center of your 3-inch slats. This way, when you flip the countertop onto the cabinets, you will have material to drive your pocket holes into. You'll see what I'm talking about later. Nothing beats a custom wood glue spreader. I grabbed my palm router and trimmed the excess portions of both the top and the bottom. You can laugh now, but this is the safest way to trim a panel this long. Next, I tackled the job most beloved by all professional woodworkers: sanding. I sanded the countertop with 150 grit first. Then I added wood putty to all the holes and crevices and sanded once again with 220 grit for a smoother finish. Then I routed a chamfer on both the sides and the front panel. And once I was done with that, guess what I did right after? Yep, a lot more sanding. You just can't imagine how much joy I feel after all the sanding. It's just breathtaking, with a mask, full of dust and stuff, you know. Okay, now we move on to placing our drawer slides. I don't yet own any one of those fancy jigs to put these slides into place, so I kind of just wing it. I use a couple of spacers to align the top drawer slides first. I grab a couple of 1/2-inch truss head screws and move on to the other side. Then I use some scrap pieces held by clamps to hold the drawer as I slide it into place. Just remember though, since you have 2 cabinets, you will need to install the top drawer on both cabinets first, then move to the middle drawer as you cut the same spacers down to size. This way you won't be wasting a ton of materials cutting spacers for each individual drawer. And for the bottom drawer, I just placed a 3/4 inch board on the bottom of the cabinet and placed the drawer slide on top of it. When you slide the drawers in place, simply align the slide rail to the front of the drawer and drill a 1/2-inch screw on each side as you slide the drawer out. You will need to remove the drawer to insert the last couple of screws. I decided to add a round over to the drawer fronts for a smoother reveal. If you don't have a router, you can do the same with a sander, and you already know how much fun that is. It's finally time to add color. I'm using a Varathane stain called Briar Smoke. I apply it with a rag in a circular motion, making sure to overlap the application across the board. A side note, you are seeing multiple panels because I'm working on numerous projects at the same time. Then I use a different rag to wipe off the excess in the direction of the grain. This is very important because if you go across the grain, you might leave behind some streaks. I don't let this stain sit too long before removing it, as the color is very rich. I then apply a semi-gloss top coat using my paint sprayer. I apply the first coat, then sand with 800 grit, followed by a second coat and sand with 2000 grit. I apply a total of 3 coats. I also spray painted my cabinets off camera, though I only sanded those to 220 grit. Finally, time for assembly. I started by measuring 3 inches from the top of the cabinet to install the keyboard drawer slide. In order to install the drawer faces, I used a 1/8 inch spacer and placed it at the bottom of the cabinet. I inserted the bottom drawer, aligned the edges, clamped the drawer to the drawer face, and drove a couple of 1-inch screws from the underside. I repeated the same process for all drawers. When installing the rear panel, I nailed a couple of scrap pieces to the top to help balance and align the panel. Next, I used some clamps and a level to align everything properly and drove in some pocket holes. I installed the keyboard tray using the same method as before with clamps and spacers. Once I knew everything aligned up properly, I moved on to attaching the countertop. I used another scrap board where I needed to place clamps in order to prevent marring the surface of the countertop, followed by some more mighty pocket holes. Now that's going to be a wrap for this video. If you enjoyed the content, go ahead and smash that like button. If you feel like you learned something, please share it with others. And if you wish to continue taking your DIY skills to the next level, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting that bell notification. Till next time.